Welcome and good morning, good afternoon to everybody. It is my pleasure to inaugurate this first webinar of the Institute for International Legal Studies of National Research Council, which is the first of a series of webinars we will organize during this end period of this. So the first of this webinar is dedicated to the work made by Luca Tarantino, which is who is a young researcher with among us now. The work of Luca was possible thanks to a specific program of Lazio region, which is called Torno Subito. I'm coming back at once to translate it into English, which is dedicated to young researchers, allowing them to make research activities in different places, abroad and in Italy. So Luca decided to have the final period of his stage at the Institute of International Legal Studies of the National Research Council, and to realize the work dedicated to technological cooperation between China and Europe on the topic of in the sector of automotive industry, and to the topic of automated vehicles, which is a very interesting topic which has many technological important implication. The article written by Luca is available on our website in the framework of a project called CRITEIC, which is dedicated to technological cooperation between China and Europe, Italy and Europe. So there you can read the full text of this very interesting essay. Now we convened a series of experts of this matter of cooperation with China in the technological field, but also in other fields, economic field, social field, cultural field, and so on. I'm going to introduce them very briefly. The first one is my friend Maria Francesca Stagliano, which is the director of the program cooperation with China of the La Plata University in Argentina. Then she will introduce better herself. The second one is also my friend Fabio Tiburzi, which I met in Beijing the first time more or less 1 year ago, something more than a year ago, and who is working on this matter of cooperation with China inside of this Institute of Research, which is called help me, Fabio, I don't remember.
Eurispes.
Eurispes. I forgot the first part of the acronym. Eurispes, which is a very important research institution in Italy. The third one is Mrs. Lynn Gotals, which works in a center in Brussels, dedicated also to the research on the cooperation between China and Europe. Isn't it, Lynn? You also, of course, will present better yourself. And the fourth one, which has some problems of connection, is Alberto Gabriele, which is very well-known economist. We wrote interesting works on the Chinese economy, and we were waiting on him, but it seems that he has some difficulties. So I think we'll start to say something because it's already time to do so. So I think that Luca's work is very interesting. It's a rather, let's say, voluminous work for being Alberto arrived also. Good morning, Alberto. Good afternoon. The work of Luca is very interesting, and he copes with very interesting issues which pertain to international law. For instance, the issue of technological cooperation among countries with different level of development, which is a very important topic, a classic topic of the so-called new international economic order, of which was spoken much in the 70s. Now the issue is less popular, but anyhow, you can say that the need for a new international economic order is now, even now, it's a very strong one, this need. But by the way, we can wonder whether China can be defined international economic order or not. Is now, even now, it's a very strong one, this need. But by the way, we can wonder whether China can be defined international economic order or not. Is now, even now, it's a very strong one, this need. So-called developed world. For instance, we see now all the efforts the Chinese deploy for obtaining vaccine against COVID, which is an aspect. There are many other aspects like the connectivity, internet connectivity, 5G, and more the space explorations and many other aspects in which China is more advanced than, for instance, Western countries, on some Western countries, in some fields, in other less. So the issue is very debated also if China can be defined nowadays as a developing country. Anyhow, this is also an issue the Luca's article copes with. The other aspects of Luca's work also concern another very important aspect, is that which if a cooperation with China has some, of course, has some strategic also implications, and this is also a very important issue, which we are facing now, now that the situation in the world calls for a reinforcement of cooperation. A reinforcement of cooperation against pandemics, COVID and other pandemics which existed and which unfortunately can appear also on the scene. Another aspect is cooperation, scientific, technological cooperation on the issue of climate change. We have to remember that China is one of the most advanced countries in the fight against climate change and also in the production of alternative energies. But there are many other aspects we can evoke to this regard. So we have to ask ourselves if there are some limitation we should be subjected in having cooperation with China. Why should we have this limitation? In which fields, in case, should we have these limitations? Personally, I am against every kind of limitation in the cooperation on technological and scientific matters, but we cannot deny that this issue is posed by influence circles, not only in the United States, but also in Europe. So it is an issue we have to avoid. We have this limitation, ignore these aspects. I'm jumping to the conclusion of Luca's article. Luca himself, I think, will address himself to us at the end of this meeting, so he can say something. But to jump to the conclusion of Luca's essay, he says that economic partnerships between European and Chinese actors concerning this issue of the connected automated electric vehicles can bring benefits for both sides, because Chinese companies can have access to cutting-edge technologies, and because European actors can gain profits by selling their products in the biggest car market in the world and increase their investments in research and development. Another thing Luca says in its conclusion is that artificial intelligence, robotics, and 5G have started to quickly reshape the automotive industry with the production of this kind of vehicles. And in order to succeed in this period of technology disruption, partnering with Chinese ICT companies could help European well-established automakers to preserve their leadership and not to be outpaced by outsiders that are better equipped with telecommunication and artificial intelligence technologies. So from the Luca's point of view, this cooperation is necessary also in a strict, let's say, sense, determined by the competition among different industry in these specific fields, but maybe this could be applied also to other fields of industrial production. And the third point Luca makes at the end of his work is that Chinese automakers and automotive parts manufacturers promote investment abroad. If effectively implemented, these investments could strengthen the position of European motor districts at top-level design and manufacturing hubs. Then the last phrase of the last sentence of Luca's work is the following one. In the next years, finding the right balance between market openness and technology sovereignty concerns will be one of the most critical challenges of our times. So I share the point made by Luca that this cooperation is in mutual benefit. To use a formulation often used by Chinese, it is a win-win situation in which every partner has something to gain from this cooperation. So I think we should explore the ways in which this cooperation can be made and developed in order to make it ever and ever bigger and more significant. I think this is also the sense of our efforts as International Institute of Legal Studies. So I think we can begin our series of interventions on this matter. I try to remember that the first one was Maria Francesca, supposed to intervene or not. I don't remember. Help me.
No, it's supposed to be Alberto, the next one.
The first one was supposed to be Alberto Gabriele, which, as I mentioned, is an economist, which has spent a lot of years inside the United Nations organization devoted to industrial development, I think, but he will introduce himself better. Anyhow, Alberto is the author of different works on Chinese economy, one of which was published very recently, which is very interesting. So, Alberto, you have the floor.
Okay.
The virtual floor.
Do you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So, yes, actually, I have been working many years with different agencies of United Nations, and in particular, I've been many years in UNCTAD. And as such, even if I'm an economist, I've also been following multilateral commercial negotiations, and I have an idea of the technicalities that have surrounded these all the negotiations on the WTO, and in particular those about services and about international intellectual property rights. So I would like to make essentially three observations. So one that is that in general terms, I very much agree with the author and with Fabio on the fundamental argument that is brought about by this paper, because I think that there are plenty of potential synergies in that could arise from a cooperation between European and Chinese enterprises and between the European Union and China in this domain that has been, on which the author has been focusing. And then it's correct to say that they're related to access to market, this, of course, especially on the part of the Europeans, and also on reciprocal technological compatibility, as both the European Union and China, in spite of being, from many points of view, still developing countries, both are technological powers. But the United Union is more advanced, and generally speaking, the European countries can be considered more advanced in the area of car-making technology program, while China is probably more advanced in the area of the artificial intelligence, robotics, and 5G. So this means that there is a basic compatibility, but there are also areas where each one can get some technological advantages from the other. In the context, again, I quote again Fabio, that if properly conducted can be a win-win nature. More holistically, and shifting from a commercial and technological to a, broadly speaking, a political and strategic field, such an initiative would be important to contribute to peaceful multilateral development, and especially for the Europeans to shrug off their dependency from the US. In my view, although I cannot prove this kind of thesis here, I see contemporary United States, either under the leadership of Trump or that of Biden, as a decadent and aggressive imperialist power, which is basing its power less and less of hegemony in the good traditional sense, and more domination, and is less and less consensus-based and more regressive. So if the European Union, and more generally the European countries, are not brave enough to agree a much higher than before degree of independence from the US, they will be more and more treated as the US usually treats the countries of the global south. So it's also, in the long run, a matter of survival of the European countries as independent and advanced countries. More technically, I shift to a second point. I wanted to say a few words on although, again, I'm an economist and not an international lawyer, but my overall feeling is that the Chinese, maybe because of their specific culture, but they tend to be rather precise and to pay attention to the specific meaning of words, probably more than Italians. So when they entered the negotiations with the great capitalist countries a few decades ago in order to enter the WTO, they painstakingly negotiated every detail in such a way that they thought, even if surrounding a lot of sovereignty and a lot of degrees of freedom in shaping their own economic policies, they could maintain enough intervention space to allow for the country's development. And I think this bet has worked for the Chinese. While the presumption that China entering the WTO would necessarily imply either an overall ruin of the country or an assimilation of China to the classical capitalist mode, has proven wrong. But the economic policy interventions and the trade policy interventions and the technological policy interventions of the Chinese, still they are entering the WTO negotiations, have been basically consistent with the WTO letter and spirit, and not inconsistent. And I guess it's easy to say and also to prove that although, like all laws and like all agreements, those of the WTO have to be interpreted and they're not written in stone, and they do not correspond necessarily to practical reality, the degree of infringement of WTO principles and norms on the part of the Chinese has not been higher than it is the case for most other developing and developed countries, and surely lower than that of the United States. It has also to be taken into account that the degree of overall liberalization reached so far by WTO negotiations is uneven sector-wise. So it's much higher in the area of the trade in goods and much lower in the area of trade in services, and in particular in trade in technology-related issues such as IPRs. So, rightly so, the Chinese and some other developing countries have taken advantage of loopholes existing in loopholes that do exist in the degree of practical liberalization brought about by WTO agreements, but these loopholes has been they're not there by chance, but they are still there in the WTO letter because they're the product of negotiations that have been taking place over a long time in a period when overall the relationship of forces between developing and developed countries has been changing. And as a result, rich and powerful capitalist countries have not been able to mold the results of WTO agreements 100% in their favor as it was thought a few decades ago. And then I wanted to make another specific observation that is, well, of course, it's not the fault of the author, but he mentions the concept of political capitalism at a certain point. Political capitalism is a term that has been coined, as far as I know, by the famous economist Milanovic to refer to the Chinese socioeconomic system. The author of this paper does not agree, does not go very much deeper on this point, but it's important to observe that this kind of notion is extremely false and misleading and should be abandoned as soon as possible. It is interesting to consider the presently existing Chinese economic system in its differences and similarities to those that prevail in the capitalist world, and it can be and the Chinese economic system can be considered more or less socialist. But it doesn't make any sense to use terms like capitalismo politico or another term that is very common, that is the old term of state capitalism that has been invented and developed in another period, in another historical period, to refer to very different kinds of economic systems. I'm done.
Thank you, Alberto. You said very interesting things. I think in fact, it is all the relationships among so-called developing countries and so-called developed ones, which is now in constant evolution. And of course, the role of China in this framework is very important, but the issue can also be seen in more global terms. So the second intervention will be that of Fabio Tiburzi, who is a researcher of Eurispes. Please, Fabio, take the word.
Okay. During this month, I saw the second China-Italia finance dialogue. This is very important to Italian and European exchange. This the second China-Italia finance dialogue is an event was co-chaired by Chinese Finance Minister Liu Kun, the Italian Minister of Economic and Finance Roberto Gualtieri. The two sides agree to support multilateral mechanisms established to ensure the universal and equitable access of diagnostic, therapeutics, and vaccine in this COVID period. Both sides agree to promote cooperation in macroeconomic policy coordination, deepen trade and investment cooperation, and create an open, fair, and non-discriminatory business environment. This is during this month. China and Italy, and also Europe in other fields, have reached a consensus to boost cooperation in global economic governance and the fiscal and financial sector in this field. In particular, Italian director of trade agency office in Shanghai told the export between Italy and China is growing in engineering, machinery, chemical products, textile goods and service. And according to Tremiterra, director of Italian trade agency, we have enough room for development and ample opportunities in China. This is a profitable moment for Italy and Europe. While Chinese company can also see Italy as an ideal investment destination. This is very important for our country and our European Union. And I don't know now, what do you think about this?
Yes, so thank you, Fabio. Now we are coming to the female part of our panel with Francesca and with Lynn. Please, Francesca, have the floor.
Yes, thank you, Fabio, for the invitation. Thank you, Luca, for sharing your article. I think it's one of the missions that in Academy we have, that is sharing our works. And thank you also to Fabio Tiburzi and Alberto Gabriele for their commentaries. I will have a perspective more broader. I'm not focusing in my research about the punctual specific cooperation on the technological aspect, but I consider this cooperation in the field of main portrait of cooperation, that is, for example, the dual circulation strategy, that is the last strategy that China have launched in the last 14th 5-year plan, 2021-2025, that is extraordinary in accord with the European Agenda 2019 and 2024. So I think there are a lot of main points in common between the two strategies that we can consider according to the Lucas paper. Furthermore, I think the electric vehicles are in a main strategy of China according to the Agenda 2030, especially in the last civil code with the green principle at Article 9 of the general part of the Chinese code, and also according to the Article 9 of Chinese Constitution. So I think it is a very prolific cooperation sector. According to the dual circulation strategy, we can put together two main points. From one side, the policy of reform and opening up, that we can see that it is a very good resume of internal domestic economy and the international economic cooperation and relations in general, according to the win-win cooperation principle, especially for Latin American countries, with the South-South cooperation as well. Now I have a sort of question for Luca, an observation. You can consider that South Europe, no, in this Mediterranean Union, no, according to the traditional double dimension of integration system of Europe geographical area, could be a new South-South cooperation. This is the best observation for Luca. And the other aspect of the dual circulation strategy, of course, is the switch from a globalization to a localization. So the push for an internal economic development, no, of China. Another observation to the Luca work, maybe it was published before the entry into force of the European regulation number 452, I don't know, about the foreign direct investment in European Union countries. In this regulation, for example, there are a lot of topics which are included in a sort of specific observation of European institutions. So I would like to know if Luca could note this, how could apply this regulation on the cooperation in the electric vehicles. And another point of my little conversation with you is a broader one, that is about the definition of China as systemic rival, as unfortunately in the last China-European Union summit in June of this year, we had to heard again this horrible expression. And I think this is a sort of strong and realistic perspective of European Union institution towards China, as well as the summit didn't produce a joint statement. So until last year, we had sort of European-Chinese dialogue on human rights, on democracy, on commercial relationships, on international relations. This year, we stayed with very bitter declarations, no? And so, according to this little challenge that we are facing now in this change of perspective of European institutions toward China, how can we harmonize this with a more long-term concept that China has with the definition of a community of shared future for mankind? How can we live together with this very negative attitude of European Union institutions toward China, while China, on the other side, is going on with a project more cooperative, more open up, more comprehensive. So this is the other observation that I have. So finally, I had I was reading the last article by Professor Wang Yiwei, that is Professor of Chamonix program at the Renmin University in China, and he, fortunately, like me, can see a lot of opportunity of strategic cooperation between China and the European Union. For example, according to the digital transformation, green recovery, service trading, almost these 3 points, says Professor Wang Yiwei, are the main strategies point in which European Union should put on. So that was my leader observation to the Luca excellent paper. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Francesca. You also said very interesting things about the cooperation between China and Europe. I think also our guest, Lynn Goethals, will dwell more or less on this topic, but maybe also on others. So I give her to her the word.
Thank you very much. Indeed, it is a great pleasure to be here and to participate in this meeting, especially since I've been working with Luca for several months while he was in Brussels at EIS. And so it's a great honor to be able to comment on his latest paper, which I thought was very interesting, and it highlighted quite a few important developments and recent aspects. So I would like to actually also open up the debate and link it a bit more to like the context of EU-China relations and more like global developments at the moment. I think there's two more global aspects to be taken into account, in particular, which have already also been mentioned in the paper itself. So I think like COVID-19 has definitely had a specific impact also on, car sales in particular as well, but also like on the development of cooperation and, also research and development, also, in terms of trade and contacts, like physical people-to-people contacts between the EU and China recently. So that may have hampered also like the cooperation that we're talking about. The question is more like, how is Europe, as well as China, going to overcome this pandemic and this crisis, and how is it actually going to establish further relations with China and also globally? And that actually brings me to the second part of the global context more, is of course like the EU-US elections, with Biden now taking over in January most likely. So the question is like, in terms of like the tech and the trade war, which is going on between the US and China at the moment, how is that going to evolve, and what is Biden going to do? Is he, it's very unlikely that he's actually going to go back entirely to the relations between the US and China as they were before. So what is going to be the role of the EU there? And of course, there's the aspect of like strategic sovereignty on the EU side, which has been proclaimed rather often lately. So to what extent does the EU, is the EU in a position to actually come up with like its own strategy and its own approach towards China without the US or, of course, its own developments there? So I think those two things are aspects that are at play in more the global arena. And then, of course, if you look at EU-China relations in particular, besides developments in the EU and China themselves, I think one of the things that has become very clear is that there's increasing polarization going on in the EU regarding China. Increasingly, like there's a bit like the aspect of the context, which is lacking in the debates. Either people are very much pro-China or they're very much against China. And it's very difficult to align people. You also see that with the EU member states and their different approaches towards China. So it becomes increasingly difficult also at the EU level to come to like a joint statement or like a joint strategy in engaging with China in very different fields. And I think the technology aspect is one of them. I think the case of 5G recently has shown that, especially like with regards to Huawei and ZTE, and as opposed, of course, towards Nokia and Ericsson in Europe. I think also like with the 5G toolbox and like the monitoring of it, I think there's a lot of things that will be said in the next couple of years about those aspects as well. And besides that, of course, I think the last EU-China leaders meeting showed a few very specific developments there as well. I think the Comprehensive Agreement on Investments, the CII, which is about to be, well, is still under negotiation and which ought to be finalized and concluded by the end of this year, which seems highly unlikely due to the differences there. But of course, we never know. We might get like a very nice surprise under the Christmas tree, although I would not really expect it too much at this point. I think there, if you look at like the Comprehensive Agreement on Investment, I think there, well, the aspect of EVs and like the automotive sector very much come into play. Also, the technology aspect and the technology transfer are very much included in these negotiations there. Especially if you look at like, well, the problems at on the European side and specifically towards China in the agreement is about like technology rebalancing market access specifically. Sustainable development, which has been mentioned, and I think there the aspect of like EVs certainly comes in. Also linked to the EU Green Deal and the digital agenda for Europe, which are actually on the European Commission's, well, the von der Leyen Commission's agenda very much for the next couple of years, and of course the carbon neutrality towards 2050 for Europe and 2060 now for China. So the opportunities and more like the positive sides, as mentioned in Luca's paper, of well, the developments in terms of like EVs and automated vehicles. I think they're like, well, the environmental impact should definitely not be disregarded. I think besides that, there's also market access and, well, leveling the playing field. Data protection, I think, is one of the main issues for the EU as well. The EU has come up with like its GDPR, but we're still waiting for China to kind of come across with, well, a counter proposal or anything to assure that there's data protection also for EU companies, and well, especially if you also look at like EVs and and automated ones, especially what is being done with the data which is being gathered, and transparency will be needed more from the Chinese side there to actually, well, kind of assure the EU of what is being done with those data. I think one of the main issues is, of course, like there's a lot of European companies in China and in Europe that are jumping on the wagon. And well, I think there's a lot more room for cooperation. But the question is more like, how should the EU respond? And well, and especially regarding tech transfer. So that's probably my question towards Luca specifically. Like, how can actually, for example, the investment agreement, how will it actually facilitate these matters? Or what can it not do? What are the limitations to it? And in terms of tech transfer, what can the EU do towards China and in engaging with China further? And of course, well, then there's the aspect of like 5G and Internet of Things on the European side, and what can be done there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lynn. Very interesting. So we had, I think, 4 very interesting interventions, also not very long, but very dense of contents, of ideas. So we learned that, in fact, this aspect to which Luca devoted his work is just one aspect of a very more wide and complex relationship existing between China and Europe, and if you like, between China and the every single European countries, like for instance Italy or other European countries. And of course, this complex relationship has a lot of aspects which are worth of scientific analysis and to be deepened and to be better known. And I think we have to, we can assert, so far we are concerned, our commitment to enter more in depth in this complex relationship and to explore this different implication of this kind of connection on many different aspects and in many different fields. Now I give the floor to Luca, who will give to us his impression and ideas after having listened to our interventions. Please, Luca.
Thank you. Do you hear me?
You have to raise the
Do you
voice.
hear me?
No, not very good.
No?
Not very well.
Right now, do you hear me?
A little better.
Okay, so I'm sorry. I have to talk like this because my
microphone
doesn't work properly. So thank you, Fabio, for organizing this webinar. And thank you, everybody. Good afternoon. Thank you also to Lynn for joining this webinar. I really appreciate that. And because I worked with Lynn previously before at International Institute for Foreign Studies. I joined the European Institute for Asian Studies. So I'm very happy she's here. The main point is just that, as you have said, I will start with the last thing Lynn said, which is like how to the EU should react to the technology transfer issues and the cooperation in the ICT sector with China. And that is the real difficult point over the partnership with China. Because on the one side, there are many things about the EU-China relationship that does not work. And for example, I talk in my paper about the principle of forced technology transfer, which is a kind of technology transfer that is not voluntary. It doesn't come under an agreement, but specifically under two circumstances. That is disclosure of proprietary information through administrative processes and restricted ownership. When a foreign investors want to invest in China, it can be forced to join in a joint venture with a Chinese counterpart to produce or sell their products in China. And for sure, this is a concern that it should be addressed by the EU and maybe also in accordance with other developed countries like Japan or the United States, because the main issue is the fact that until a few years ago, China didn't have developed this level of technology advancement. It was still a developing country on many sides. Today, China is a technology power, and there is no doubt that she outpaced the European Union on many different sides. For example, from 2015 and 2017, the World International Property Organization states that China has filed the 14% of patents all over the world, on the total number. And this is a breakthrough in this sector compared to the previous years, because if you just consider that only 30 years ago, still according to WIPO, 70% of the patents ever published in the world were coming from 3 countries, which were the United States, Japan, and Germany. Or again, talking about GDP, R&D, research and development expenditure against GDP, China has surpassed the EU level, the EU average level. In 2018, China spent 2.14% of its GDP in research and development, while the EU spent 2.02. So it's clear, or finally, Huawei, the case of the ICT companies, especially in telecommunications. Today, Huawei really leads the sector because besides to be a leader player in the market, is also the company who has filed the biggest number of patents. It's from January to October 2020, Huawei filed more than 8,000 patents in mobile wireless technology, which is the highest number a company filed this year. So as you can see, China can no longer be seen as a developing country, at least on this side, on these issues. Maybe other issues, okay, they still have, it's a big country, they still have the mainland part, still have to be developed, and they still have to do a lot of things to grow in those areas. But on this side, China should absolutely start, in my opinion, should absolutely start to acknowledge the fact that certain practices that were okay some years ago today are no longer possible. So this is one side. The other side is just that, as the director said in his presentation, mentioning the findings of my paper, the European countries really need both Chinese market and Chinese companies. Chinese market because China is going to be, and is already, the biggest automotive market in the world. In 2018, in China were sold more than 20 million vehicles, all in China. So the market is fundamental that the European Union and the European companies will keep investing in the market, because they can get the highest revenues, the biggest revenues in the world by selling that market. And at the same time, because of the thing that China today is a technology power, they should partner with Chinese ICT companies, such, for example, Huawei, but also, for example, about my paper, concerning my paper, Okai Technology, which produces radars that are a fundamental component of connected and autonomous electric vehicles, or WeRide.ai, which is another company focused on developing autonomous vehicles technologies. And that partnering with those companies that have cutting edge technologies and they are leader in their fields could help European companies not to be outpaced, because this is a very important point that I mentioned in my paper. The main risk is that well-established automakers, European automakers, could be outpaced by outsiders, and also the World Intellectual Property Organization mentioned this. The European companies could be outpaced by outsiders that are better equipped with artificial intelligence and telecommunication, 5G features, and or autonomous vehicles features. And the main case, the best case is Tesla, which is a company that has still much less revenues than the European or Japanese automakers. But in July 2020, it was listed as the most valuable company in the automotive sector, which means that in the future, the investors have great expectation over this company in the future. So I wouldn't say that it's a matter of survive, because in the automotive sector, it will be exaggerated. But for sure, it's important for European companies to partner with Chinese counterparts that reached or even surpassed the technology level of the European ones. So the best way probably is to not to fall in a direct confrontation like the United States has done against China, like that they engage China in a techno trade war, but try as much as possible to keep a cooperative approach. And while trying to address the main issues existing concerning the EU-China economic relationship, acknowledging also that Europe and European companies need Chinese counterparts, needs to maintain their leadership in the automotive sector. And finally, a last comment that I would like to tell you that makes even more complicated this scenario that I'm describing. There are some issues, and for example, some fields of the Chinese automotive Chinese market that are not more or less open. Like not every sector is opened in the same way. For example, in April 2020, the Chinese government released the new infrastructure plan, and this plan says that while 5G telecommunications, satellite communications will remain, investment in this field will remain highly controlled and close to foreign investors, the autonomous vehicles field will further open up and to private investments without, and will be incentivized also. So as you can see, not every sector are closed in the same way, and that's add more problems in a certain way to promote an assessment of the EU-China economic relationship, because you cannot always apply the same filters to their relationship, And so this was my answer to Lynn's comments. And then I would like also to reply to Maria Francesca, and like she asked me, like she wanted to that I make some observations concerning, for example, the position of Italy in according to the EU-China trade, the EU-China trade economic relationship. So, yeah, Italy, it's a bit complicated because right now we are going in the national dimension, and for sure Italy could exploit this is my opinion, it's not related to my paper. For sure, for sure, Italy could exploit better the economic relationship with China to get advantages towards the other countries of the European Union. Like, for example, signing the Belt and Road Initiative on March 2019 for Italy was for sure a good move, in the meaning that Italy badly needs investments for abroad, and China could be a great partner according to that. At the same time, it's true that, in my opinion, I think that Italy should keep being inserted in the European Union framework. That it shouldn't maybe it's not the best idea to try to force the bloc right now and create a South cooperation among European countries at the moment. So that was the answer to one question. And so, yeah, concerning the definition of systemic rival with China, it's that the EU define China as systemic rival. I could say that, yeah, for sure, it was it was influenced by the European Union, probably as to react by the by certain, but a certain attitude from China, but not only from China, also from a more geopolitical mindset. I also mentioned that in my paper, because all the world powers have recently started to have a different approach towards international trade, and there is a more geopolitical approach where also there are different issues and concerns to be evaluated. And the important thing maybe is just that to keep that definition alongside other definition also, like that even the EU made in the past, because the EU called China as a systemic rival, but also a strategic partner. So like maybe right now the best way to handle the relationship with China is to use a multi-layered approach, where of course, okay, I call you in a certain way, but but it's important to never forget to keep an approach, a cooperative approach, and not face the other with an aggressive approach, like maybe can be the USA approach. Yeah. So you can talk now, Fabio.
Thank you, Luca. In fact, we can wonder now whether the approach by the United States with the arrival of Biden, if Biden arrives, because it's not very clear if he will arrive or not, but if he arrives and if he sits on the presidential on the chair of the United States, will he change his approach towards China or not? We know that, for instance, China already, some days ago already, recognized Biden as the new president of the United States. Russia, for instance, didn't yet recognize Biden as a new president. So it's also interesting this decision by China to recognize Biden. Anyhow, it is also true that at any rate, Europe has to follow its own path, whoever can be the president of the United States and whichever can be his approach. I think this is very important It is also very interesting what Luca said about the multi-level approach in cooperation with China. Of course, there are different levels, but I think that all these levels should be brought together in some way and should be put in connection among themselves and in dialogue among themselves in order to shape a fruitful dialogue. For instance, we speak about electric autonomous vehicles, which seems to be a very technical topic, but in fact, these vehicles have also, for instance, a big importance from a point of view of environment, because this kind of vehicle present a lower impact on environment than other kinds of vehicles, which we unfortunately in Italy, but also in other countries, are very accustomed to, like these very pollutioning vehicles, which still are on our roads and so on. So there are different implications. Technology can be used for different aims. You mentioned, for instance, the radars. The radar is a typical technological concept with many military implications also, of course. But it is used also for developing this kind of vehicles. So there are many connections, and these connections should be elaborated and brought to the forefront in order to have a sound and well-based relationship among the different actors in the world scene. So thank you, Luca. Now we can decide to give the floor to our public. If there are some short, very short questions or short intervention by them, and after we can give the floor again to interventors for if they want to reply something, to precise something, they have ideas to illustrate to us. So is there any intervention from the public? We have until now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 persons we are listening, hopefully more, but so I see Gemma appear.
Fabio, sì, eccomi. Mi senti? Hi.
Please.
Just one question. Many thanks to all of you for this interesting webinar, and I am very much interested in the
present yourself, Gemma.
Yes, I'm
Gemma. You are very
yes.
famous, maybe someone
exactly. Sorry. Yes, I am Gemma Andreone, and I'm a senior research at the Institute for International Legal Studies, directed by our famous Fabio Marcelli. Notorious. So thank you so much for this webinar, and maybe my question would be more a suggestion for future and extra investigation. I don't know, because actually I didn't read the paper, the Luca's paper, so this is also, I also take the opportunity to ask if you can share it, and I would be very interesting. And the question is if the transfer of technology done in a cooperative and smooth manner, as many of you has invoked, is really and if we are everybody aware of the fact that it has to be based on the idea that EU enterprises cannot transfer technology toward countries where this technology can be used in breach of human rights, and this has been also mentioned. But I want to come again on this point, because, for example, in breach of freedom of thinking, right to expression, free expression, or right to free opinion or political disagreement, because actually EU enterprises are bound by recommendations, for example, the OECD guidelines for multinational enterprises that are binding upon governments and are just recommendation for enterprises, but those guidelines are indicating that even enterprises have to respect human rights and protection of environment as well. So I think that we have to take into consideration that even if when an EU enterprise is transferring technology that permit to other countries or to other enterprises that are not working on the European territory, but in an extraterritorial way, and they are breaching or they can use this technology for breaching human rights, so EU enterprises will be considered responsible under the OECD guidelines. So this maybe is something that we have to take into account, together with what Luca was saying, that on the other side there is a forced transfer of technology, so some limitation from the Chinese side. So thank you.
So the question is to Luca, so far I understand.
Yes. Or to other interveners that.
Okay. So let's see if there are other persons from the public who want to say something. Otherwise, I think we can give the floor to Luca and to other who wish to take the word among the kind experts who participated to this webinar. I don't see any other wanting to take the floor. So I propose to give the floor now to Luca, and after to make a tour with Francesca, Lynn, Fabio, and Alberto on this matter raised by Gemma, but also on other matters you want to say. Okay.
Yeah, so this is a very crucial issue.
Raise the voice, Luca. It's not very understandable.
Do you hear me? No? Better?
Yes. Okay, okay.
This is a crucial issue about EU-China economic relationship, because how the EU should react to certain facts occurred in China. For example, the problem of the Uyghurs in Xinjiang, or the Hong Kong repression. So, and this is a crucial issue because it's basically, in my opinion, it's basically impossible to solve, in the meaning that the EU should stick together with its fundamental values, which are the protection of human rights, and try to promote these rights all over the world. But at the same time, it's always important to not to instrumentalize or antagonize countries as a whole with these specific issues. Like there should be a limit about the cooperation, or when there is a possibility that that at least this company maybe is making an infringement of human rights. For example, I might say like video surveillance companies. That's okay. In my opinion, the European Union should, European companies, the European Union should break the cooperation with these companies. At the same time, as I said, as I also stressed in my paper, cooperation in other fields, and of course I mentioned the autonomous connected and autonomous electric vehicles should be more than welcome. Yeah, and I finished.
I might want to step in if possible.
Yes, please, Lynn.
I mean, actually linked to that, what you've been saying about like the aspect of like the human rights and everything. I think to a certain extent, the EU has already tried to, come across that by setting up the the European investment screening mechanism. Of course, that is more in terms of like technical details on the aspect of, state-owned enterprises and state, involvement. But I think maybe that could be also like including the aspect of human rights abuses and other aspects that could be included in that mechanism to a certain extent. But of course, that means, or that involves more the aspect of investments, foreign direct investment into Europe, and not outgoing or like cooperation with partners outside of Europe. On the other hand, there's also like, of course, the strategic interests of the EU that should be defended still. And I think that also links up to that debate. But on a positive note, I think also like the example of Geely and Volvo. Of course, like the Geely holding actually has had a merger and acquisition actually took over Volvo. But ever since like the trade between China and Europe, especially like with Sweden, but also like coming into Belgium, mean, there's trains going back and forth on a daily basis now. So there's a lot more going on there. And I think, well, there are some positive examples in the developments. But I thought, like, basically earlier, Luca, there were a few things that you mentioned that I thought were, well, either debatable or that raised some questions for me. I think also, especially like the aspect of the multi-layered approach, a lot of people have praised it, but I think there's also like been quite some criticism as the two-facedness of Europe and this debate, like how can you be like a strategic rival on the same, and at the same time actually like a cooperation partner, and how does that work? Because of course, like China does not really like to lose face, but that's kind of like the very balance that you're trying to achieve there, which is very difficult to be maintained in the long term, I think. So I think I do agree with Mr. Marcelli that maybe that should all come together at one point, and like that Europe should actually come up with like a very clear-cut, approach towards China, like what it really wants and how it wants to achieve those things. And I think the strategic outlook, the European new strategic outlook on China was a very first step in that direction, but I think we still have a long way to go there. And I think also like, and you mentioned a few aspects in like, in terms of electric vehicles. I think the market in Europe especially still has a lot of growth potential. And the question is how to establish that. Should that come also like in terms of cooperation with Chinese companies or not? And I think one of the main issues in Europe to that extent is also the aspect of charging those electric vehicles. Charging points have been very much debated. And I think also the aspect of like the sustainability has been put to question there. Especially because, well, the electricity generated might not always be as sustainable or renewable as we might expect it to be. So there are still a few questions related also to the aspect of like electric vehicles. Besides that, also like, you say that partnering with Huawei would be a good deal. On the other hand, actually the development at the moment is quite the opposite in Europe. They're trying rather to restrict it or to at least control cooperation with Huawei. And of course, there's different approaches by different member states in the EU. But still, I think that's also like a bit up to question in like, well, for security reasons, this might not be possible. So where do we go from now then? And of course, like, well, in terms of artificial intelligence and 5G, Internet of Things, how should Europe move ahead if it's not able to be working with Huawei? Are we going to be able to keep up or not? Because I think, well, Europe is indeed starting to lag a bit behind, especially if you see like how China is already rolling out 5G in mass numbers at the moment. So I think there's a lot of questions to be raised, more, and of course, also maybe for like some future research and some future debate. But just some questions and comments at this point. Thanks.
Thank you, Lynn. Francesca? Nothing to say?
No, I think everything was already said. I think the multidimensional cooperation that we have in strategic also sectors between the European Union and China is the key point. And that's why I point out in my little speech about the totally wrong strategy of European Union actual strategic speech, institutional speech, because I think in this kind of situation we have to have an harmonization between the strategic politics between China and European Union and Europe in general. I would like to mention also the meetings 17+1, in the East European countries, with China, and how this kind of alternative and innovative cooperation system was totally misunderstood by European institutions. So what I remark is the need of a common politics of European Union institution toward China, because otherwise what we are witnessing is that each country is doing what it wants, basically, no? Like Italy, Spain, Portugal, Greece, and other states that are signing the memorandum of understanding, for example, in the Belt and Road Initiative framework, and then European institutions are concerned about this. So it's very strange point. I mean, I think that European Union has a very deep and strategic partnership with China. So I think this is the correct way. And the example of Luca's paper about the vehicles and the cooperation in this innovative field, I think is a very good example of how this cooperation can be virtuous, no? So my concerning is also about the institutional speech by European institution that was really ridiculous in my point of view. So that was my main point.
Yeah, in fact, you can say that this lack of a common policy towards China is an aspect of a lack of a European foreign policy in general, because I don't know if there is any topic on which European countries are somehow on the same position concerning, for instance, the relationship with some crisis area very near to our borders, like Libya or Syria or others. We see the same kind of political chaos you mentioned. Every country goes for its own interest or for what it thinks is its own interest or the interest of a particular ruling group inside the different countries. So this is an aspect of a more general problem. The issue of human rights, which was very opportunely evoked by my colleague Gemma Andreone, is very important one. But I think we should see human rights as a common goal among the different countries, not as a weapon a country can use against another one, like unfortunately was the case in the recent and less recent past, when human rights were used with other arguments in order, for instance, to invade a country or to impose to a country sanctions or other unilateral measures, or to try to conditionate their autonomous policy. Instead of that, I think human rights should be a common goal towards which the different countries should work together, also with the help of international organizations working on different matters. For instance, a very now important human right, maybe the most important of all, we see it in these months, is the right to health, which requires this kind of cooperative approach, and which has also an organization which is the World Health Organization, WHO, which is in charge for these tasks and which should be relaunched. Let's hope that, at least from this point of view, the arrival of Biden, if he arrives, can bring something positive to the international scene. Fabio, do you want to say something more?
I have no specific question, but I wanted to congratulate Luca for the work he has done. Congratulations.
Okay, let's congratulate Luca.
Thank you.
Together.
Thank you, Fabio.
I suggest him to study, for example, military situation for the radar specific work. Chinese radar they can release F-22 stealth jet fighter, and China have this type of radar. If you want to study this,
okay. Thank you. I will check it for sure.
Okay.
Well, that's very important. Alberto, do you want to say something more? Alberto Gabriele? No.
Sì.
He doesn't react. Okay. So I think we can end.
I think Mr. Gabriele wanted to say something, but he's muted.
Pardon?
I think Alberto Gabriele wanted to say something. Exactly.
Okay. Alberto, you want to say something?
The microphone was off. Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
Alberto.
With respect to human rights, I agree with your position. I mean, they're part of the show, but we serious people, we shouldn't take this kind of stories too seriously. So when countries are into big geostrategic and economic and geoeconomic negotiations that talk about human rights, these things have to be taken with a pinch of salt and not the face value, of course. And the same, in a way, applies to the concept of forced technology transfer that was rightly mentioned in the paper. That's also a trick. I mean, there's not such a thing as a spontaneous technology transfer to other countries or other economic actors. So that's also a word that can be used as a negotiating tool, as a bargaining tool in negotiations, and we have to consider them at their face value. Not at their face value, but as some way semantic devices that can help one or the other side in complex and concrete negotiations. This said, I think that it would be in the best interest of China and of world peace to, on the part of China, to show vis-a-vis the Europeans a very positive and some way weak position in the field of trade. And I make a specific reference on the would-be investment treaty. So, as correctly Lynn said, this investment treaty appears to be in high sea, and it's not very likely that it will be signed before the end of the year. I think it would be very well advised on the part of China to show a lot of flexibility in the specific trade issues in order to gain more overall diplomatic leverage and degree of cooperation with the Europeans.
Okay, thank you very much, Alberto. So now I think we are more or less finished. Just two little things. Since we had a very interesting discussion, I think this discussion will be available on YouTube channel of our institute, but we will give you more information on our website on this matter. But maybe if the kind of interventors could send to me also one page with some notes on what they said, it will be very welcome. So 1 page or 2 pages or half a 1 page. Whatever you want is welcome, to your good heart, as we can say. And the other thing is that, as I said, this is the first webinar. There will be a second one next Monday, which will be the 30th of November, the last day of November. We will present in a webinar on the same channel a book on Catalonia, which was redacted by myself and a series of very important and prestigious constitutionalists and lawyers from different countries, Italian one and Spanish, Catalan, others, on the issue of Catalonia. So I invite you and to assist, if you can, also to this webinar, which will take place next Monday, the 30th of November, at 3 p.m. in this same channel. The information is available on the ISGI website. So thank you very much. Thank you first of all to Luca, which produced this work we discussed today. Thank you to Francesca, to Lynn, to Fabio, and to Alberta, and to Gemma also for having intervened in this webinar. And thank also to the people we didn't speak, but who limited themselves to listen to this meeting. And of course, our institute will continue to work on this and other matters. Thank you and have a good afternoon.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.